Okay, so our speaker today is Andres, who is a student in the architecture department, working with Anil and Ronita on urban forests. And I guess he's going to talk to us about his recent work. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and for those who are online. Some people are familiar with the work. Some people have seen this talk at Propel a couple of weeks ago. So this is like the largest project of my PhD. I'm a third-year PhD student in Airborne. So what I'm trying to do is like quantify urban forests in all of England. And this was the talk done at the Propel Programming for the Planet conference in Singapore 2 weeks ago. Cool. So why do we care about urban trees? Well, this is a picture from when I just arrived in Singapore. Hopefully, I don't need to convince you of why trees are important, especially like around cities. They provide a lot of ecosystem services. They provide reduction of air pollution, noise reduction, and all of these benefits. Parks also are this place where social cohesion happens, the communities gather. So there's a lot of social benefits as well. And it's the main nature-based solution that people talk about and that it's being proposed by councils and governments. Singapore is actually a very good example of this because 95% of the native forest in Singapore was removed to build the city essentially. Until in the 90s, the president said that we're going to create a city that is green for everyone. And they follow this city in a garden policy, and they have been following for like more than 30 years until, well, and it's one of the greenest cities in the world. Cool. The framework that I'm using, I didn't come up with, but it's something that one of the like the phases of urban forestry in the recent years proposed, which is called the 330-300. I may have mentioned this to some people. So it says that in a sufficiently green city, every person should be able to see 3 trees from wherever they are. Every neighborhood should have 30% canopy cover, and you should be at the most 300 meters away from decent size public park, right? And the thing with this framework is this was proposed in a way in 2021. It's a very catchy name. But many cities in North America, Europe, and Singapore as well, they have started to use it as a baseline for how greening policies actually should be done. And I wanted to provide like a database framework for of how to quantify this. But there are like some challenges in that regard. One of them, like I assume like most people are familiar with this, is working with the different kinds of data. So you have vector data, raster data. In my case, you have graph data as well. And they come in different formats, projections, sources. Some of them don't even align. So that is a bit difficult. And the other problem is scale. So most of the studies that quantify green infrastructure or trees in cities, they do it in one city. They have just one case study. So most papers are like, oh, this is Singapore, this is London, this is Toronto, all this. What I wanted to do was like a national scale assessment of greenery, and that significantly increases the size of all the data that I'm using. So to give you an example of the number of like points that I'm working with 29 million buildings, all buildings that are registered in England, from which 24 million are residential, more than 3 million roads, 16.5 public parks. So this data, like if anyone is this kind of data, the buildings come from this company called Verisk. These are all open source datasets. The roads and the public parks come from the Ordnance Survey. So for those who don't know, it's the national agency that maps everything in the UK. And the important part is the 190 million trees. this didn't exist until this project started, because this is one of the important components of like the whole framework. And this is the toolkit of everything. Well, if anyone has any questions about any of this, I can answer them at the end. So I use R, as I mentioned, with the thing with Quarto, I tend to lean on R heavily for plotting, but they have this LiDAR package for manipulating LiDAR datasets. And the rest of the work was done in Python using NetworkX for manipulating the graphs. Apache Sedona, which Amelia used to use for manipulating large-scale vector datasets. GPandas X-ray for raster-based datasets. Cool. And this is what the tree segmentation looks like. So I'm going to start like at the end. This is what it looks like. So I created this website that shows all of the trees as I measured them in England, and you can. This example in Cambridge. I can send you the link. There's a QR code at the end of the web app. But this is how it works. So what you see on the left is how I quantify the three individual components of the tree 3300. So tree says that it's three visible trees, but visibility is a bit difficult to measure because that implies some geometric calculations and 3D like estimation that I don't have access to, and it's way more like it's more difficult to do. So I redefine tree as tree proximity. So how many trees are there around where I live or where I study? So I have the buildings, and I segmented the trees. So this is how I segmented the trees using LiDAR. There is a you can see. Okay. Del Ponte and Coombs algorithm, the same Coombs that we all know, David Coombs, and a local maximum filter function on LiDAR-derived canopy height models from England. I derived the crown shape, and I use the centroid of the crown as my reference point. And well, from that process, I found 190 million trees for all of England. And I use the height and the area to kind of filter what a decent sized tree is. So like anything between 3 and 60 meters is a tree, which is, I mean, ecologists and botanists kind of like agree that that's a reasonable size for a tree. And what I do is I count how many trees there are at different distances from each building for all 29 million buildings.
Can I say is this similar to the C trees? You know the C trees database from Sasan Sachi?
No.
Okay,
okay. No, I'm familiar with that. And this is what it looks like. So this is an area in Tottenham, in London. And what you see here is like all the buildings in the area. The green spots are the centroid of each detected tree. And the colors mean the number of trees that they can see within 25 meters, or they can see now that are within a 25-meter radius of each building. So the red polygons or the red buildings don't have any trees within 25 meters, and the blue ones in this case have 9. And the canopy cover it was the simplest one to calculate because I had the canopy cover, the canopy height model, sorry. And I using the same definition of tree is anything between 3 and 60. I just calculated the percentage of pixels that are within a boundary, and I calculate the canopy cover. So an important clarification here is that the boundaries here are the output areas, which are the census definition of neighborhoods here in the UK, which are used for, by the Office for National Statistics, and that's like the standard definition of neighborhoods here. And I use that as my boundaries or my definition of neighborhood. And this is what it looks like for the same area. So you see, for instance, the top part of the circle, it's a park with a couple of buildings, and it doesn't have a lot of trees because it's just grass. And yeah, this is the canopy cover. The distance to the closest public park was actually the most fun to estimate. So think of this as I have the buildings and I have the graph, and the graph and the buildings live in the same space, but the buildings are not part of the graph. So what I'm doing is I'm taking, and the graph is the road network, sorry, the road network from the Ordnance survey. So what is happening is I'm using the closest node to each building and the closest node to each access point to a park to measure along the graph what is the shortest path between those 2 points, right? For all the parks and buildings in England. So this is actually measuring the walking distance because the edges of the graph are the length of the road, of each road. And this is using Dijkstra's algorithm on graph data. This is the 3 main components of the 3300. But as we all know, like most people work with remote sensing data, we can get much more information from satellite images or aerial images. Oh, sorry, this is what it looks like. Sorry. This is the park that I mentioned that had a low canopy cover, and the yellow spots are the access points to that park. So it's not any point in the park that I can access; it's the actual access point to the park. And you can see in gray, and the circles are the nodes in the road network or in the graph that I use to estimate the distance from each building. And what I was saying is that we can take this even further and get information from satellite images. Like many people here work with Sentinel-2 images or any kind of satellite remote sensing data. So what I did was take images from 2024 of Sentinel-2 and estimate 3 main indices for the whole year. And those are the NDVI, NDWI, and NDVI. So vegetation, water, and built-up index. The reason why NDVI is because it's related to trees, and well, it's closely related to the tree 3300, and it's also being used in many studies to estimate greening policies in cities. The water index, because one of the arguments that I want to, or one of the things that I want to include is that nature, or like greenery, is not only about trees but also about water. Is the other component of blue and green infrastructure. And the built-up index is just for validation to corroborate that there's buildings over there, or like impervious surface. Cool. And this is sorry, I don't know, like anyone has any questions on the methodology? Or
A couple for the end.
okay. So with this in mind, I should have said that this is all in a preprint that I can share with you on Zulip. I think actually it's in Zulip. So here, this is like the first figure of the paper, which is trying to show how we quantify greenery in a country, or in this case, England. So we can quantify trees per capita, or we can quantify per area, and those two show completely different pictures. So if you count the number of trees per person, you can see that the north and the southwest are super green. But if you actually account for the area that those trees are covering, London is actually very green, which is kind of like counterintuitive. There are many reasons for that. One of them is that many of the parts in the north that are rural, they're not necessarily forests. They can be croplands, farmlands, and the population over there is not very dense, or there aren't that many people living up north. And London in the inset map, London is actually one of the greenest cities in the world. I was reading the other day that the council estimated that almost 50% of the entire area of Greater London is either green, not only green parks, but also like green roofs and like small gardens, and also blue infrastructure, as in lakes or the river itself. And well, London, yeah, London has a lot of parks. So this is one of like the like the contrasting findings that I got from the analysis. The other one was that I actually wanted to prove the 330-300, like as it was proposed, like if I don't have more than 3 trees, then I'm bad. I live in a very green place, or if my neighborhood is not 30% canopy covered, or if I live more than 300 meters away. But there's like more nuances to that. Like it's not like what I argue is that it's not like a pass or fail. Because if you look at the data by region, so for those who are not familiar with how England is split, you have 9 regions, and for London, I divided into outer and inner London because those are 2 different things. And you can see that the rule that has the more attainment is the first one, the tree proximity or the tree visibility. Well, not most of the people, but more than 30% in all regions have more than 3 trees within 25 meters. And yeah, that varies between regions. Like for instance, the Southeast has more than 50% of the people. And inner and outer London are roughly similar, but canopy cover is by far the worst performing one. And it's interesting because from previous studies and research in health, they know, or well, the community knows that canopy cover is the most crucial aspect. Like visibility of trees, or how many trees, it works, but the overall canopy cover, like how much actually green you have, it's a predictor of health outcomes. So, and it's the one that is performing the worst in the country. It's worth noting that the Southeast is the one that is doing better, way better than the rest. Like you see that, I think the actual number is 10%. 10% of the Southeast has more than 30% canopy cover, but the rest of the country is different. There is a kind of like a big difference between outer and inner London, because outer London is less developed, inner London is older, so it's difficult to like replace buildings with trees. And the distance to park is the one with the second most attainment. And this is inverse. So what you want is a fewer number, like a lower number. So in this case, inner London performs better than outer London, and the rest of the regions perform similarly, just below 10%. And sorry, this is the I forgot to mention, this is the proportion of the population within each region. Cool. This. So the other thing that I wanted to like measure, or like in a way compare, was the deprivation level. So deprivation is this like measure of wealth. I specifically use the index of multiple deprivation that the government develops every 5 years. This is the latest release, which was in 2019, which means that they're due 1 year of a news release. And essentially, this considers many different variables, as in healthcare, housing, environment, crime, education, many other variables, to say how deprived each area is. So the more red, the more deprived; the more blue, the less deprived. And what you see here is what you would expect. So less deprived areas have more trees.
What is each column?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So each column is each one of the regions from the previous one. So northwest, northeast, yeah, and the last two are outer and inner London. And what you see is like regardless of the region, all wealthier areas or less deprived areas have more visible trees and more canopy cover. And the pattern repeats in inner London as well as outer London, except for the number of trees in this one here. But there is a surprise here. You think that wealthier areas have more parks, which is not the case. If you see here the distance to park, you see that more deprived areas live closer in like on average to a park than wealthier areas, which is like it's the opposite to the other two metrics. And finally, I wanted to like, because I said that I wanted to also quantify water. This is the distance to water bodies from each building, like aggregated for each level of deprivation and region. There aren't that many difference when it comes to distance to water, because this is to any water body. So it's the ocean, lakes, rivers. So it's not as clear as a difference as in the other three metrics. Sorry. And what I'm showing you here is the canopy cover. The canopy cover for all the country. I don't know why it wasn't shown here. Okay. Anyway, so this is the canopy cover. What you see are the green areas. The southeast is the greenest area in the country, and what you see on the right is a metric of inequality called the Gini coefficient. I don't know if people are familiar with Gini coefficient. So what I'm using as the definition of wealth is the tree component and the 300, because those are the ones that I measure at the building level. Assuming that building is like someone from the population, I can measure the inequality per boundary, and the more trees you have, the richer you are, or the less. In the case of the distance to the park, the lower the number, the richer you are, because you live closer to a tree. And this is a bivariate map of both of these metrics. So the more blue, as in all of London, means that the Gini coefficient, or the area under the curve of the largest curve, is 1. And that means that the provision of trees is not equal in that area. So more like a few people tend to gather all the trees. And the more red, this red, means exactly the same thing, but for parks. As in, more red means that some people live, or like parks are nearby a few people. And if you're in a very dark area, like in this case, you live in a very unequal area for both components, right? Oh, sorry. This was the explanation of the Torrance curve. This is part of the methodology. I forgot. So for the number of trees, I didn't use the raw number of trees because that is very variable. As in, you might ask, like, why did I choose 25 meters? There is no like reason behind 25 or 50. So what I did was this. Remember at the beginning that I told you I counted the number of trees at different buffers. So what I can do is kind of estimate a regression of how many trees do I expect as I move beyond my house. And these are two examples in Cambridge. So these are actually the worst building in Cambridge and the best building in Cambridge. And you see how they perform. And what I'm using for the Gini metric is the is the slope of the regression between the distance and the number of trees as my metric for wealth or green wealth. And that is like all of the paper. So the first thing is that this is the first national assessment of green infrastructure, meaning that I can compare cities. It's just not about one city, London, but I can compare London and Manchester or London and Cambridge. And because of how it's structured, this is a reproducible framework. I'm using open source data sets that can be replaced by OpenStreetMaps or like data from national agencies. But one of the first things is that that I argue, and it's very difficult to measure, is that quality doesn't mean quantity. I'm measuring distance counts between trees and parks, but does that actually mean that people use it, or that the quality of the green infrastructure is being is benefiting the people? Because what we saw in the distance to like the box plot of the distance to the park, we saw that wealthier areas actually live further from parks. That may actually point to the quality of the parks that are nearby poor areas. I also like there are many more variables that I'm not accounting for, like rich people. Well, they might not need green space per se from like public areas because they have private gardens, or they can travel somewhere else. So the quality is not being measured. And that is one of the critiques of the 330-300, because now, well, cities are adopting this metric to as a baseline for their green policies, but how this is going to impact, or like the effects of adopting this are not going to be visible now, but in 20 or 30 years. And that is what I'm trying to like argue in the paper, as in like it's not about quantity but also about quality. And this is like an evidence base for measuring greening policies. Oh, this is and this is the final result, which is another web app that like measures everything that I just said, aggregating by the LSOA, which is neighborhood, the output area. And if you want to learn more, you can scan the QR code to see the tree segmentation app, the aggregated app that I just presented, the repo of all the code, or if you want contact, well, ask me. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Any questions? We have lots of time. Yeah,
Thanks for the talk, very interesting. But I think in the UK context, a green pasture is a very important type of landscape. I mean, in China, if you say greenness, it mainly refers to trees. But I find here, like, people have many like lawns, grass grown. So, what do you think about this aspect?
Yeah, well, because there are many types of green spaces that I filter out, essentially because public spaces are places that can be impacted by council policies made by the council, and these like I don't know, like grasslands or like pastures are not necessarily something that is within the like what councils can affect directly. So that's why I decided to go for public parks only. Yeah, that is the reason. Yeah,
I think he's saying, if I'm not mistaken, why not look at pasture land, meadow land as opposed to trees? You may be far away from trees, right? Is it, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like in people's perception, it can contribute to the greenness.
okay.
People can enjoy in the nature
without having to have any trees. If you go to the Peak District, you know, it's all very few trees, but it's quite nice.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's you can't go in it though. I guess is the distinction, right? You can, like arable land in the UK, you can't legally walk on. You can look at it from a car. So I guess that at least distinguishes it from parks, for instance.
Yeah. And the other thing is that like this was mostly focused on urban areas, and most of these are not precisely in urban areas. They tend to be like quite far. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I should correct myself because I'm in England. In Scotland, I believe you can walk through fields.
Yeah, there's right to roam in Scotland, they were not here. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why and Andre's studies is in England specifically. So
Yes.
Well, there are other reasons why it's in England. Mostly because the data was only available for England, sadly. For instance, all the building data and public parks and all that are available for all of Great Britain, but the national LiDAR program only covers England. So that's why I was just working on the data limitations, I guess. You said you had a question.
That was actually what I was going to ask about the LiDAR data.
Yeah, so that was one of the initial struggles at the beginning. Anil is very familiar with this. So I initially tried to do tree segmentation on aerial images. Well, the government collects all of these, and getting data from them was just pain. It was super difficult because you had to ask them, can I? If you go to the portal, you can just request like 10 square kilometers, so you can only do like small areas. Even if you want London, you could spend a whole day just downloading the data.
Is this from like Airborne?
Airborne, yeah. And so there's like a big download that you can request, but by big download, they're just like gathering all these files into a zip file and sending you like a Dropbox link. So it was very difficult. What I decided to do was use like a sub-product of the National LiDAR program that is called the Vegetation Object Model, and it's 1 meter resolution. So for these kind of tasks was good enough. And it covered the entire nation, not country, nation. I actually have the plot of the areas that are being covered. Let me just search for this.
At some point, by the way, I think someone was emailing Andres the LiDAR data every day manually for like 6 months.
Yeah, it was true. Like, and I had to, and these links only lasted for 2 days. And I remember at some point I had to leave, I think, to Colombia, and I had to go to architecture, plug the Ethernet cable, and download the data at 11 p.m. Because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. Sorry, I couldn't find the image for. Yeah, but it covers all of it.
There's also Switzerland has a complete.
Yeah. So one of the things that I discussed with Ronita about doing is comparing this with Singapore, because Singapore. Well, the thing about Singapore is that Singapore is kind of like a city experiment. I think everything is very controlled, and it's a good baseline to compare to places that have grown more organically. Yeah.
Because I mean, for LiDAR service, I know it's Switzerland. I think Belgium also.
Yeah, I know Spain has. I have a. At the beginning of my PhD, I created a spreadsheet of cities that have tree surveys,
Right.
High resolution images, and yeah, those two. LiDAR, I didn't gather all of them. It's not as common to have LiDAR.
Yeah.
But many countries in Europe have LiDAR on their entire territory.
Yeah.
I didn't actually say this. Such a cool talk. So.
Oh, thank you.
How long did each of the steps take computationally to run?
So the longest one was the tree segmentation of all of this. So there's a lot happening in the background, as in like I didn't actually finish the story about the data. So I had to scrape the data because even the Department of Agriculture, DEFRA, they don't have like a very easy way to download. So I had to scrape the data and it does it using the national grid, which is like they divide the country into squares of different sizes, like 1 kilometer, 5 kilometers, and they have a code. So I had to request each code individually, and that was like each iteration of the tree segmentation was using that square, and that was in R. And R is quite famous for being slow. And that was the longest part. But initially I had done all these analysis at the polygon level, at the building level, like the 29 million stuff, using only GeoPandas. But then I spoke with Amelia, and she introduced me to Sedona, which helped do all of these tasks super fast. So the 300 part, the distance to polyparks that measures the Dijkstra's distance, took like, I don't know, like I think like 6 hours for all the buildings. And the canopy cover is very like in, I don't know, like in 15 minutes it was done for the entire country. Yeah.
Okay, and so the segmentation was like
Yeah,
days?
segmentation was by far the longest one.
Days?
Yeah, in days it was, I think it was 2 days for the entire country.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. Because it wasn't only the segmentation, but also doing a spatial join between the trees and the buildings and the buffers around each building at different distances. So that was the difficult part.
Yeah.
So that's why Sedona is kind of useful, because they do spatial indexing, so you don't have to load all the data for all of England, but just when it's like within a 100. Yeah.
I have a question, and very cool talk, by the way. And you were talking about Singapore, right? They have this thing where they have trees in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you were talking about, if you can see 3 trees, well, clearly, say from my hotel room, I could see 3 trees in the
Yeah.
middle of the road, but is that really helpful for me?
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. As I said during the talk, like the only metric that is actually that has been proven to work is the canopy code, because that is like the role, like I don't know, like it's the wealth of the green wealth within the city. But seeing 3 trees, I know there are studies in like psychology that, like, I don't know, like I've read studies of, they have kids taking tests with a window looking at tree and taking the same test, like looking into a wall, and they perform better looking like to the window. But there are many things that cannot be controlled, like the light, sunlight, and all of that. And yeah, it's very difficult to quantify the visibility aspect. Some people argue that, yeah, like seeing green is good, but quantifying that is difficult. Most of the time they do surveys, but that is not as, like, those variables are more qualitative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I would prefer to have trees in the middle of the road because
Yeah.
they look nice, but it's hard to quantify like how much nicer it is compared to the road.
Yeah. And there is this thing in evolutionary psychology that they call biophilia, that humans by nature, they tend to be more prone to be closer to like nature. But it's a very like blurry concept. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
You talked about like utility for this kind of thing in terms of comparing cities, but then it seems like most of the comparisons that you showed were for like larger areas,
Yeah.
except for London. But did you like look at like London versus Birmingham versus Manchester versus like,
Yeah, well,
zooming into each of those, like the bigger cities in the UK?
so one of the things that, like, bigger cities, as in Birmingham, Manchester, and London, they behave similarly. So you can see, like, this is London, this is Birmingham, and over this is the Merseyside, Manchester, and Liverpool, and they behave similarly. Initially, what I thought was happening was, you know, like there's this north and south divide in the UK, like northern areas tend to be poorer, and the south, or like most of the economy is driven by London. That is not the case for like these metrics. There's not a north and south divide. There are like regional differences, but yeah, like I didn't compare like smaller cities. I only had like a couple of things about Cambridge. Yeah, I should probably do like more like fine-grained comparisons of
Yeah,
individual cities. Yeah.
although I guess the big push, which is to
Yeah.
have all the
Yeah.
data and
Yeah.
all of it normalized and everything, it's easier now to ask those kinds of
Yeah.
questions.
Oh, and I can, sorry, I didn't do that part. Yeah, so this is the tree segmentation. Takes a bit to load all of this. So yeah, I would say like after working on this for a while, everyone should move to Parquet. As Michael can probably tell as well, because it's just so much easier. It makes everything just run smoothly. Yeah.
I am just
So-
shifting the whole of Tessera to Parquet as well for that reason. It's greatest format of all time.
Yeah, and I've been playing with SAR. Has anyone played with SAR as for rasters? No, has anyone heard of SAR?
No.
No, it's like a raster format, like a replacement for TIGS,
Oh, okay.
and it's it uses less storage and it reads faster.
Is it the SAR?
Yeah.
The same way as synthetic aperture radar?
No, ZA.
Oh,
that one-
ZAR.
ZAR.
Ah, okay.
ZAR.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been using, and it's kind of, I've been using it for Tessera. Yeah. And this is to answer your question, this is the one for the entire country aggregated data. Sadly I cannot publish by building because I don't own the building data. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about this 330-300? I mean, it's a nice slogan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 30 by 30, or
Yeah.
some other people like 30. But if I had to choose between 330-300, if I could do 430-300 or 340-300, which one would I do? Which dimension is...
Wait, I didn't understand the
So
point.
if I went from 3 to 4, or I went from 30 to 40, which one would you pick? Or 300 to 400. And what I'm saying is like, okay, in my city, I can't do 300 to 300.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm at something else.
Mm.
Which dimension should you
Um,
increase it? So I mean, like, is it better for somebody to see 5 trees, or if there's 1 tree, should they go from 1 to 2 trees? Or would it go from 20 to 25?
I would actually get rid of the tree, like the first one,
Yeah,
because the visibility of proximity is not very, like as I was saying, like
Yeah.
seeing 2 trees is not really something that
right.
provides any. Or
If you live in the top floor of a 60-story condominium tower, you can see lots of trees.
Yeah.
Doing you no good at
yeah,
all.
but there are like dots.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in Toronto, there are people who live along the bayfront,
Yeah, yeah.
they're on very tall buildings. They can see lots of trees.
Yeah.
I don't think it's helping them anything.
Yeah, I would, as I said, like the canopy cover, I would stick to that one, but
Yeah.
30% is an unfeasible metric.
Yeah.
Especially for, I don't know, like most cities cannot just replace
Yeah.
buildings and roads for
Right,
parks.
I mean, but I mean, maybe my question is even a bit more insidious. These numbers, you spend a lot of time trying to compare them. But what is the evidence showing that this actually is relevant to, I don't know, human happiness or whatever it is that you compare? I mean, if you live in let's say 30% canopy cover, right? 30% canopy cover is unachievable if you live near a farm,
Yeah.
right? If you live in the countryside, yet many people like living in the countryside,
Yeah.
and they have 1 or 2% perhaps canopy cover, but they have lots of hedges and whatnot. In terms of human happiness, human development indices, Scandinavia comes out quite a bit on top, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think the Danish countryside has got 30% canopy
Yeah.
cover, perhaps 1 or 2%, right?
Yeah.
So, these numbers seem sort of more or less made up.
Yeah, which is something that I mentioned in the paper, that again, this is like it's a catchy name because it rhymes with trees and all of this. But the power of it is not the raw numbers, It's just that it's easier for policymakers to
I mean,
transmit.
are policymakers so stupid that they fall for catchphrases? I mean, what you're telling me is politicians are so stupid that they don't care about evidence.
Sorry, hang on.
No, but that's
This-
what I'm providing. Like this.
This conversation is going in the wrong direction, right? So politicians are not stupid here. I mean, there's a bunch of evidence around the social sciences and urban development around the general need for these three metrics, right? So the World Health Organization has a general kind of guideline that no one should live more than 300 meters from a high quality green space. That's existed for decades. And then similarly, the other ones have similar evidence bases for general urban design. So this was just some person coming up with the three together, with the emphasis being that balance needs to be struck between them, not exactly what the proportions are between each of the numbers, but the fact that many cities simply don't meet these benchmarks at all. And Andres's research shows that there's still a lot of stratification across even a relatively small space like England within the confines of that rule. That's it, right? It's not kind of judging the general kind of policy-making framework around this. It's simply showing that there is a lack of equity when you compare within a particular space. And I think that's an important result, because it means that we still have a long way to go to make sure that there's minimum standards for enjoying urban nature in cities. But it's not
I think
policy making, right?
What you're saying is really good, and also the amount of work Andres has done is truly impressive. I think it's incredibly, it's good work. I'm just kind of questioning from that perspective, these numbers, when you put them out like that, it looks as if there's a lot of, and you're saying the WHO has said these numbers are true. So maybe it would be helpful to say, what is the reason why these numbers are what they are, right? Because there's no evidence. You say, well, somebody said 330, 300, but maybe you could have said WHO has found whatever, and that 30% canopy cover is the one that at least common sensically doesn't make sense. Because you said the most important is canopy cover, because they asked you which one is most important. But then 30%, at least from my own sort of, smell test, doesn't seem to meet the smell test. So it would be interesting to see why canopy cover is the most important thing,
Yeah. Well, one of the things that with Ronita we want to do, and this is like one of the next steps of this particular project, is doing a health impact assessment of these policies. Because in a health impact assessment, what you're trying to measure is the effect, and it ties back to what we're talking about, causality.
Yeah.
About these changes, say in Cambridge, they actually do the 30%. What is the effect on health outcomes? So like I presented this in A4ER event last year with some initial results of this, how this impacts or not impact, like how this compares to diabetes prevalence in the same areas. And there is some indicator, but again, like having green doesn't mean that you actually use the green to exercise and all of that. But doing a health impact assessment can actually tell like policymakers, increasing the not to 30%, but 1 or 2%, what is the actual effect on the people?
I mean, it's not an effect, at least it's correlated with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not quite, right? There's been lots of studies on the 30% canopy cover. So one's in Europe to assess that there's less like mortality around heat islands for this. There's like better sleep. There's a large body of work around urban development for this. So
okay. I'm completely unfamiliar with this. This is
right. I think one of the tricky bits is that it's quantitatively less significant, right? But it's not clear that it's qualitatively more important canopy cover. Like those three of them have had decades of other people doing longitudinal studies around it. And so I think Andres's point there was that there's quantitatively less difference between these things. But that's not what all of the existing body of evidence does. They do more interview-based studies and kind of sleep experiments and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's actually another very good point. In presenting this work, it would be helpful to. I think that's a good point. People have talked about this, but I guess they're doing all these surveys, right?
Yeah.
And they're saying, no, actually, you can do it from data.
Yeah.
Which is really quite a novel way of addressing the issues. I think, and that's quite interesting as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's difficult to know how to make those two meet, right? In general, like there's this there's a bunch of kind of intuitions that across millions of people, and now we've got a bunch of satellite data, and it's difficult to know what the black box in the middle actually should be.
Okay. Any other questions here, by the way? I don't know who else is not there. So any questions on that?
I can ask.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about, thank you for your talk. So you have like a finding that in the richer area, like people kind of live further from the nearest park. Do you have like explanation for that, or just like, I didn't catch it?
Well, it was what I said about the quality and quantity.
Mhm.
I'm just taking all the public parks, but quality is very difficult to quantify. And wealthier areas, what happens there is that in their houses they might have gardens, so they don't need to go to a public park because they have the green space in their house. And it's not like I'm not accounting for that part. So that is one of the explanations. And it's one of the like the weakest points of the 330-300 because it's not considering quality. Like just the fact that you have a park doesn't mean that you will get the benefits, like the social cohesion that I mentioned, or the the noise reduction or air pollution reduction. It doesn't mean like just living near doesn't mean that you will actually benefit from that. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're pretty much the end of our time, more or less. So let's thank understanding. Yeah, we will be here next week for our next talk. I can't remember who it is, but okay.
It's me.
Oh, it was you. All right.
Yeah.